Well, we may be on a hiatus from actual college sporting events at the moment, but the world of college athletics never stops, throwing us a curveball or coming right down the middle of the lane on a fast break. We are moving from P5 to P4, and everything is looking different. We're going back to campus today, right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, friends. It is July 1st, 2024, and a holiday week. Here is hoping you all find some downtime and a little rest and relaxation during the July 4th holiday. I am Missy Heidrick, national correspondent here at The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs have winded down, the sport stopped sporting like we maybe want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, the WNBA and the Major League Baseball are on our radars this time of year, along with a huge anticipation because the Summer Olympics are at the end of this month. But while summer school is in session on every campus across the country, July 1 is marking a massive change in college athletics. We've got new teams to new leagues, others with barely a lamp left on at the office, and settlement rulings that are making us all wonder what this is everything going to look like even a year from now. But what we do know is the SEC and the ACC, they welcome and onboard new members today. The Big Ten and the Big 12 are next. And this new version of what we see and how the NCAA is going to manage, really, ultimately, what's going to be the fallout of payouts. Here to talk about it with me today is someone that I truly admire. He is a Hall of Fame sports journalist from the Kansas City Star, a man who has covered Super Bowl champs, World Series champs, national champs, and even more. And he's getting ready for probably the busiest 8 to 9 months coming up. But Blair Kerkhoff is here today. Hello, Blair, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball.
Missy, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to steal a line from, I think, one of our sports journalist colleagues out there in the X Twitterverse. And they said today is migration day, that this is where everybody is moving and everyone is picking their stuff up and going somewhere else. It is raining cats and dogs right now here at my house in Kansas City, but I don't think anyone is going to rain on Oklahoma or Texas's parade today because they are headed to the SEC. This is a new era. You saw this many years ago when the SEC changed, and we saw probably the first iteration of conference realignment when Missouri and Texas A&M made the move to the SEC. And Nebraska went to the Big Ten. It seems to me, though, and tell me in your opinion, this just has seemed very different. And I think it's maybe the terminology that people have used, that we want to talk about value and stability and brand. But this is just a whole different world now as we look at Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC.
It is a different world, and there is a different feel to this migration because for me, you have the breakup of an entire conference with the Pac-12.
Right.
You've got not only the 4 schools coming into the Big 12, but the 4 schools coming into the Pac, into the leaving the Pac-12, going into the Big 10, and then Cal and Stanford, of course, joining the ACC. How crazy is that? The ACC going from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean now. So that's different. When I've been covering the Big 12 since its inception back in 1996, and that was, listen, a conference ended then too. The old Southwest Conference dissolved because Texas A&M, Baylor, and Texas Tech joined the Big 12, and that conference was intact for more than a decade until as you mentioned, the four schools left: Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, and Texas A&M over a 2-year period. And those moves were about finding better financial situations, just like any move like this is. It's all about improving your financial situation. Well, then it didn't necessarily include conferences bursting at the seams geographically, right?
Yeah.
Look, there was a little bit of a stretch with West Virginia coming into the Big 12 and, having to make the Lubbock to Morgantown trek. And then in the last few years with, Central Florida coming in, making the Stillwater to Orlando trek. But now there are no boundaries for college sports. There just absolutely aren't any. Not with, not with Stanford and Cal, now going to Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts for a conference game, and in the Big Ten, going from Eugene, Oregon to College Park, Maryland to to play the game. So that's what makes it a little bit different, and it just goes to show, it goes to show how college football rules college sports, because all these moves were made because of college football properties, right? People wanted to, college TV executives and conferences wanted to match up USC versus Ohio State, and Michigan versus UCLA, Oklahoma versus Alabama, and Texas versus Georgia. That's where the great value in college sports is. That's why we have the situation that we have today.
Let's talk about this SEC scenario, because they're the ones that's the big launch today. The ACC, obviously, their migration happens as well. We've seen some of that already out amongst, in the media. Oklahoma and Texas have embraced this. I think if you talk to people behind the scenes, behind closed doors, there was maybe a lot more trepidation when this sort of all landed in our laps. Ironically, during an Olympic time period, the last time we went around this, we were all watching track and field and gymnastics and swimming. And then Oklahoma and Texas said, oh, by the way, we're leaving. We're going to the SEC. I think everyone thought it was maybe a joke, and it was not nearly at all a joke. But this is, as you know, from watching Missouri make the move to the SEC, while it seems as though maybe this was everybody get on the Sooner schooner, but yet I don't know if Oklahoma was maybe as excited about this as Texas, that they know this could be a harder pull for them in that conference. The SEC is no joke.
That's absolutely right. Oklahoma had some historical ties with the kind of the original Big Eight members. Not only, Kansas State, Iowa State, but more importantly, Oklahoma State, in its own state. They were going to the SEC for Oklahoma meant the end of Bedlam as a conference rivalry. Now the schools are still trying to figure out if they can, continue to meet in the regular season in so many sports. And we all would want to see that, right? We all want to see Bedlam football, Bedlam baseball, Bedlam softball. How good has Oklahoma State and softball gotten over the last few years? So the schools are still trying to work that out. But that's what, when it came to those two schools in particular, I think it was the decision for Oklahoma included the historical pull, where it didn't necessarily include that for Texas.
Yes.
Texas has always looked out for itself and always sought the best deal for itself. Even back 15 years ago or so, when it looked like the Big 12 was going to collapse, it was going to collapse because Texas had sought out and got the Longhorn Network on ESPN, and that ticked off a lot of the existing Big 12 members, and especially Texas A&M. So that sort of sparked A&M's interest in leaving the conference and why they joined the SEC. So anyway, short story, Texas has always looked out for itself. Oklahoma has these incredibly long-standing relationships with a lot of schools that it's been conference partners with since the 1920s. So yeah. I did think that gave Oklahoma a little bit more to think about. But in the end, Sooners did what the Sooners had to do, and that was join Texas and make the move to the SEC, where the value of being in that conference is just going to be enormous for Oklahoma.
Well, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier when you start thinking about the long-term viability, stability, the value, the brand, and the dollars. We know what that does. Football drives this train, but yet not necessarily an easy scenario. I mean, let's take a look. You mentioned softball. You've got Oklahoma. They're heading now into the SEC as the 4-time reigning national champions. We saw the SEC on display with college basketball. And oh, mind you, Dawn Staley and an undefeated South Carolina team, they sit at the perch of the SEC. It's not a simple transition necessarily, I think, for Oklahoma or for Texas anywhere. This is going to be hard for both of these historic and very well funded, but also very successful athletic programs. It's not going to be simple.
Absolutely not. Just look at who played for national championships in the spring sports, right? It was in baseball. It was Tennessee beating Texas A&M in the College World Series in baseball, 2 SEC teams. Oklahoma beat Texas for the second straight year in softball, both going to the SEC. I believe Arkansas won one of the men's or women's track. I can't remember if they won both, but Arkansas's track program is phenomenal. And other sports speak for themselves. Football is, they've ruled college football now for almost 2 decades, and so many other sports. It is going to be a step up in class, and we can have the discussion who's more ready for leaving the Big 12 and going into the SEC. I happen to think it's Texas rather than Oklahoma, but Oklahoma is going to be very competitive in a lot of sports. Texas just has their athletic program seems to be on an upswing in a big time way now, and it looks like Texas is chomping at the bit to get to the SEC and to prove its value in that conference.
Oh, no doubt about it, and they have embraced it 100%. From blowout parties to social media campaigns and live television broadcasts. I mean, I think they had Paul Feinbaum. I mean, he's living good. He's living at large right now in Austin. So, I mean, they have embraced it from the beginning. I would ask you before we kind of leave this SEC side of the house, you watched Missouri make that transition and have covered Mizzou athletics for a long time. It's an uphill battle. As you look at Mizzou in itself and where they sit with their program, now that you're adding 2 more teams, it doesn't get any easier if you're the Missouri Tigers from top to bottom, really in anything.
That's absolutely right. It's been difficult for Missouri, for the most part, being in the SEC when it comes to all sports success, right? Number of conference championships. If you're a conference champion in just about any sport in the SEC, you're a national championship contender. Mm-hmm. So, but those opportunities haven't come along frequently for Missouri in its SEC era here. Look, the second and third years that Missouri was in the SEC, its football team won the East Division and played for the SEC title. So their baseball team has been to super regionals. Softball has been to the College World Series. They've had moments and pockets of success. But their football team last year wins 11 games, beats Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, and has really got a lot of momentum right now. Mm-hmm. But the Missouri's still waiting, I think, to make its mark on the conference and to have that signature moment in the SEC. And I would also tell you, not just Missouri, but Nebraska and the Big Ten, same way. They left at about the same year, and Nebraska's still looking to make its mark in that conference as well.
No, I think you're right. It's not as easy as everybody always thinks it will be. All right, when we come back, day 1 of the new look Big 12 is just around the corner as well. We're going to get Blair's take on it, what this means going forward, and the competitiveness from top to bottom in the new look Big 12. Well, we all love sports and we love them so much we don't ever want them to stop. But as the playoffs have winded down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going wherever you want. And all I have to do then is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. Here in Kansas City, we love to keep our eye not only on what the Chiefs might be doing coming up, but also Bobby Witt Jr. and those Kansas City Royals. And so this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com/locked-on and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sporting betting partner of Major League Baseball. And also a message from our friends at Magic Spoon, who are great supporters of us here at Locked On Women's Basketball. Cereal is one of the best parts of being a kid, but as you get older, you got to watch out for all those things like sugar and empty carbs. Magic Spoon has amazing flavors you will love, high protein, less sugar. Now there is a variety pack, 4 flavors, cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, high protein, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs, and only 140 calories per serving. Huge favorites in my house is cocoa and frosted. There are empty boxes all around. So go to magicspoon.com/locked-on to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. We should all have that, I think. So if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high protein cereal at magicspoon.com/locked-on and use the code LOCKEDON to save $5 off. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume a bit with all the shouting. Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am here with Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star, a man who has seen a little bit of everything over the years. As he just told us a little bit ago, he has been covering the Big 12 Conference since its inception back in 1996. I'm going to date myself, Blair. I'm a Big 8 kid. I played 3 years in the Big 8. My senior season was the first year of the Big 12. So I've watched all of these people and all of these places come in and out, and it changes all the time. But we are here, and this is going to be a new look Big 12 officially come August 1st. I know college football media days are at the end of July. When the Pac-12 imploded and everybody started going everywhere, 4 teams landed with the Big 12. As you look at this now, and it changes geographically, as we've said, that's driven so much of this, but just your thoughts on what this Big 12 looks like, where it's headed, and is this finally the right fit?
That's a good question. I would imagine if the Big 12 had its druthers, it would continue to have programs like Nebraska, Texas, and Oklahoma, the Texas A&M, the bell cows of the league originally. But if it can't have those, I think that the acquisition of the 4 corner schools, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, fit this conference nicely. I think for the revenue sports and the non-revenue sports, there are good additions. Colorado is coming back to the conference, right? Colorado was an original. You played against the Buffs, and now they're back. After spending almost 15 years in the Pac-12, and now they're back in the Big 12. So I think what it does in football is we lose 2 favorites in Oklahoma and Texas, and we gain 4 schools that I think should be competitive almost right off the bat. Utah especially looks to be a really good addition for football. And then, the way I think about it is with the 2 schools gone, who's going to be the Texas and Oklahoma? Who's going to be the dominant football power in the Big 12? Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah. There's an opportunity now for someone. I heard somebody the other day look at it this way. Like when we think of shopping malls, they have anchor tenants, right?
Yeah.
Well, Texas and Oklahoma were the anchor tenants, and they've moved on. Mm-hmm. So now who's going to be the new mall? So why not the Wildcats or the Cowboys or the Utes? And let's see who it's going to be. So I think from that standpoint, we may not have national championship caliber football, but that may be the only sport in which we don't. I think that I think the Big 12 will be good nationally in many, many sports.
Well, you mentioned that because I think one of the things that Commissioner Brett Yormark, who came into this job a couple years ago in a very tumultuous time, I think embraced all of those buzzwords we mentioned a bit ago, brand and value and stability and long-term viability and all of those things, but is taking a bit of pride and kind of putting that flag and saying this can be a basketball conference. And I think on both sides of the house with men's and women's basketball. And we know that so much of this drives that in the men's side of the house. But as we have seen, the exposure and the interest and the eyeballs watching women's basketball consistently moving forward, I feel like that can only be a good thing if you're in the Big 12 moving forward.
Women's basketball is at a different level now in terms of interest than where it was just even 5 years ago. It's amazing what's happened to the growth of women's college basketball. You and I sat next to each other at Kansas State for the Kansas State-Colorado second round game, and there were almost 11,000, full house at Bramlage, almost 11,000 people, and it was an incredible atmosphere, just wonderful atmosphere there. And that was not the exception, but the rule in NCAA basketball tournaments. There were great crowds all over the regional map for women's basketball, and we saw what happened with the TV ratings. Right, it was amazing. So, I think when we look at the future of college sports and the health of college sports and the finances, you include women's basketball as a potential revenue generator, along with men's basketball and football. And after that, I don't know. It maybe depend on the school and the sport, but I think there is so much potential for women's basketball on the college level as a revenue generator that I think in the Big 12, I think is in a good position to take advantage of that. I think we're going to see better regular season crowds for women's basketball, more season tickets being sold, more sponsorships. We know that NIL deals are available to women as they are to men. And shoot, I think women are the women's side is taking advantage of NIL as much as the men when it comes to branding and salesmanship. And I know that a couple of years ago, when NIL first kind of got off the ground, at least nationally, 4 of the top 5 NIL contracts were going to women athletes and not men. Now, I don't know where that stands now. And look, the whole financial landscape of college sports has changed just in the last few months, right? Yeah. With the with the NCAA settling the lawsuit and a $2.8 billion decision, and now athletes are going to get paid like they never have before. How much of that's going to go to women's sports? That's a big question, right? And what? Yes, it's still to be determined, right? And what kind of impact Title IX will have on the decision making here. But I think what we're going to see is colleges determine what the kind of fair market is. Where can businesses want to invest in athletes who can sell their product? And I think women can do that and have done that. So I think that's one way college sports is going to look and act differently in the future.
No doubt about it. You've covered Kansas State, Kansas, and really everything over the years. And as I think about kind of going back to this Big 12 discussion, and we know the geography has changed. It's one thing that they're hanging their hat on. We can go from coast to coast now, multiple time zones, all those things. There are some rivalries that have been retained even in this new look Big 12. A K-State, KU, Iowa State's in that mix, Utah, BYU. Now they're back and, they're in the same league again. That can only be good for fans and for excitement. But when you look specifically at like a K-State and a Kansas and the middle of the country, now P4 schools, as we can all say, strong programs, mid-level budgets, how important has this stability of the Big 12 and this kind of newfound look, how important is it for those two types of institutions?
It's everything. It's survival, right?
Yeah.
We can just look no further than Oregon State and Washington State to see what would happen if you're outside P4 now. And my heart goes out to those two schools that did not get to the two Pac-12 schools that didn't hook up with a Power 4 conference. And listen, if it wasn't for Brett Yormark, you mentioned him earlier, the Big 12 commissioner, doing the maneuvering and putting the Big 12 in a position to get a lucrative contract from ESPN and Fox ahead of the Pac-12, then I'm not sure what the future would have been for the Big 12. I'm not sure we would have seen it dissolve, but they would have taken much less money for their TV contracts. And the Pac-12 just said there wasn't enough there. Their schools can do better in other conferences, and that's where they went. They went off to the other conferences. So, very essential for Kansas State to continue to be in the Big 12. And we know that the TV contracts it will last until, I believe it's the 2031 season. Not that they shouldn't be thinking about their futures beyond that, but at least they know that that they are part of revenue, good revenue generating conferences, not at the SEC and Big Ten level, but at the ACC level. And you're still part of the Pac-4. You're still part of the college football playoff. You can be, uber competitive in just about every sport, not just about every single sport that you choose to be competitive in. I think they're in a solid position going forward. And how much fun is it for people in our neck of the woods to have college football to look forward to with K-State, KU, and even Missouri, I think all going to be preseason top 25 teams.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more. I think one other thing, you're a Kansas City person, you've been here a long time. I thought the commitment by the Big 12 to keep the Big 12 basketball tournaments and championships in Kansas City for a longer run now, that seems to be a commitment to this part of the league, kind of the old school traditional side of it. We're not going to Vegas. We're not taking it to Texas, that it stays in Kansas City. It felt as though that was maybe a nod to say, to the Iowa State fans and the KU and the K-State fans, the people that have made this thing what it is, we'll keep it here in Kansas City because this is a basketball town.
Absolutely. And the other thing was to play the women's tournament at T-Mobile Center along with the men's tournament instead of listen, I love Municipal Auditorium. I'm a big fan of that old building. I really am. I wish it was used in a different way. But anyway, the women in T-Mobile Center for the first time this year, I thought it looked great. It felt great. And then the men played the next week. So, look, Brett Yormark is nothing if not a smart businessman. And he understands that having the basketball tournament in the middle of the country may be advantageous for KU, K-State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, the ones that are closest to it. But you're going to be closer to it no matter where you put it. Yeah. And now you've got, not equidistant, but you're not giving – it's not West Virginia. It's not somewhere that's far flung. It's in the middle. It's in the heart of the conference right now. So I think that it was a great move. And you're right. It's going to be in Kansas City into the early 2030s.
Yeah, which is fantastic. All right. When we come back in just a moment, more with Blair Kerkhoff from the Kansas City Star and what we're about to encounter in the ever-changing world. He mentioned it earlier of college athletics. We are going to start with schools directly paying student athletes and how the world is going to change. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Women's Basketball. And my pleasure to have Blair Kerkhoff, longtime columnist and reporter at the Kansas City Star. And Blair, we saw this news come out a couple weeks ago. There were some precursors. I actually talked about it here on this podcast last month about what was coming down the pike, that there was going to be some decisions. There was going to be some, I guess we could call them settlements, because if you go to court, it was probably going to be worse. And you got all of the conferences on board. And ultimately what we've done is we've created a pot of money, and we are going to tell everyone that we are no longer really in the world of amateur athletics. And it seems to be such an oxymoron when we think about the NCAA and what that has meant for so long. But yet we are now going to be a year from now in the world of directly paying student athletes, and school upon school is coming forward to say, we are going to do this. How has this and how will this change the landscape moving forward?
Well, first of all, they better do it, or their opponent or the rival is going to do it, and then you lose a recruiting advantage, right? So yes. It is profoundly changed. It's the biggest structural change of college sports maybe ever, right? Because it was an amateur, in name at least, an amateur enterprise since its inception back in 1906. And now it is no longer amateur, because each schools will have up to $21 million to pay their athletes on an annual basis. It's essentially revenue sharing, money from TV contracts that are going to go to the schools. So at that point, the schools now have to decide what their pot is. Let's just say it's going to be $20 million per school, and how to distribute that money among the athletes. So I think there's a lot to be determined. This is all relatively new, right? Just in the last few weeks, as you mentioned, and schools are trying to figure out how it's going to happen, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. I do think there's a consensus of opinion out there that, football players and basketball players will get the highest percentage of this, but every athlete is eligible to receive it. Mm-hmm. How schools determine that, what kind of formula they use, we're all curious to see what's going to happen. Some schools offer more sports than others, and Ohio State, probably has, up to 25 sports on combined men's and women's. In a school like, Kansas or Kansas State, 5, 6, 7 sports less than that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that money will be used to just flat out pay the athletes. And as I mentioned earlier, what's the Title IX reckoning here? We know that. I think
that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's a great question. We don't know, do we?
We don't. It hasn't been. There's no answer out there for that yet, and it may take another ruling to establish that. Half of the money has to go to women's sports. We don't know that. I would be surprised if that ended up being the case, but I don't know. I just don't know. But it is a new world, an eye-opening world for college sports. And listen, one of my sincere hopes is that along with this newfound money that's going to these athletes, that financial education comes along with it. All of a sudden, teenagers are going to come into money that was not available to teenagers in previous, generations of college athletes. And so I'm hoping, and I'm sure that this will be the case, that schools will provide this benefit, how to invest, how to save, how to spend, I've covered a lot of professional sports and NFL and Major League Baseball, and I know the stories of athletes that squander away money as professionals because they don't know how to handle it. This is an opportunity, I think, for colleges to do a good thing here and educate their athletes on newfound income.
No doubt about it. And I think we saw that even a couple years ago when NIL, name, image, and likeness, came into the world of college sports. And as you said, both men's and women's, a lot of female athletes taking advantage of that. But then there was some consternation, and you've got 21, 20 or 2-year-old kids going around, well, I didn't know I had to pay taxes. Well, it's income. That's how the world works.
Right.
Like you don't just get to put it in your bank account and then just forget about it. Like those are all of the things that we say everyone's so quick to rush to do it, but yet there's repercussions, the ripple effects of all of those things down the road. My one question to you that I would ask as I think about this, and I think it's been brought up, and it's the underlying current. We start talking about pots of money, paying student athletes, where that money goes. This changes the dynamic of people's budgets. It changes how they operate. And I think there's a fear, and it may not happen right away, but we may not see some of these programs in non-revenue sports or whatever it might be. It's happened in the past. Men's sports, women's sports have been cut. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility as we go forward in this new landscape, because I don't think anybody really is sure if they have the foundation to be able to survive with everything.
Right. I've heard that from some athletic officials at schools, that they wonder about, how the paying of athletes is going to impact their athletic department budgets. And one thing that we have seen, and is certain schools already layoffs in athletic department, officials.
Yes.
Texas A&M is one that has laid off a lot of people in there. Now, I don't know what a lot, how to define that, but more than a few laid off in the Texas A&M athletic front office. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. And Missy, one thing I do think we're going to see is we always talked about an arms race in college football, or at least in college sports, when it comes to facilities and amenities for the student athletes. I don't know if colleges are going to engage in the arms race in the way that they used to. And what I mean by that is put the money into facilities and amenities when they can just send that money directly to the student athletes. And I think if you're a student athlete, you want the money. You like the nice locker room and clubhouse and shower, whatever, however a school's spending money to pamper you. Yeah. What you really want is the money. And so I think that is going to be a change that we see going forward, is less of an arms race, more of money going directly to the student athlete. So schools have a lot to figure out and determine over the next year and a half how it's going to play out financially for these schools. And I think it'll take some adjustment time. And I say that we're sort of in the adjustment time now with NIL and the transfer portal. These are new concepts for college sports just over the last few years. We're still trying to figure out the right way to handle those.
No doubt about it. And I think we're here in the middle, in Kansas City. We're surrounded also by mid-major conferences, whether that's the Missouri Valley or the Ohio Valley Conference. We have to think, the American, those things that are the mid-major worlds are also going to feel this ripple that we all think Power Four and, big day for the SEC, et cetera. But there's a lot of mid-major institutions and mid-major leagues that are sitting around scratching their heads thinking, what does the future really look like for us? How are we going to make this work?
That's a really good point. You're right. The conferences that are not P4, that are still Division I, FBS and football, but not part of the P4. And you name some of those conferences: the American, Mid-American Athletic, the Sun Belt. And just for the football playing. In fact, a school that we're familiar with, Missouri State, just decided to shift conferences and get out of the gateway for football and Missouri Valley for basketball and enter the American. So, or is it maybe Conference USA? It's Conference USA. And they did that because they wanted to upgrade their football. They wanted more access to football money. Conference USA has bowl tie-ins and TV contracts. and for football that the Gateway or the Missouri Valley Football Conference doesn't have for them. So they're investing in football and moving up in football, but those schools they're not going to have the money, and they're not going to have the TV contracts.
Right.
They're not going to be able to pay the athletes what Kansas State, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska, they're just not going to be able to. So then I ask myself, look, it's not like the number of colleges have increased. There's still going to be opportunities at those schools for athletes that don't play there. What's changed over the last few years is if you excel as a freshman at a school like, let's just say, Missouri State, well, you get a free transfer to wherever you want to go, and you can keep transferring up and be at 3 or 4 different schools. And maybe your talent takes you to a place, a school that can provide better finances for you instead of staying at that one school for your entire 4 years. I think that's what we're going to see different about college sports going forward.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. It looks different, and I'm crazy as it is, it looks different all the time. And I had somebody ask me the other day, like, well, what do you think about so-and-so's roster for the basketball season? I said, hey, I go, there's still some time. I was like, I'm not even going to think about what some of these, because they could change. I mean, you just never know. So I go, let's wait till October. We'll all make sure the official rosters are put out by the sports information directors, and then we'll be able to digest who's actually on the roster. It does me no good to try to. I can't do anything with it right now.
I know you can't. And think about assistant coaches now who do the recruiting. They just don't. The recruiting landscape has changed so much. You've got to recruit other teams. You've got to scout. You've got to scout other teams. And I don't mean to. You got to scout to recruit them and see if they'll fit with your roster. See what kind of NIL offer you can make for them to join your team. And that's the world we live in. I mean, it's not going to be a surprise when the college basketball team that you pull for has half of their roster different that had changed over from the previous year, not with new freshmen or junior college transfers, but Division I 4-year transfers because they got a better deal at your place. So that's just the world we live in. We got to get used to it. I'm not sure how fans are going to accept it. Listen, college sports still has great appeal. We all love it. The television ratings and the attendance suggests that it's not losing popularity.
Right.
But I wonder after years of switching teams and getting paid, I don't know what college sports is going to look like 5 to 10 years from now. I do know that we still love it, and we'll still watch it. We'll still consume it. Just tip the ball off, just kick it off, just throw the first pitch, and we're all mesmerized.
That's how I look at it. I'm like, if we get past all of kind of the BS on the backside and just play the game part, it's way more fun. All right, Blair, I've got one question for you before I let you go, and so appreciate all of your time. This is, as we said at the very beginning, today's migration day, everybody. We've got people moving, conferences changing, everything. We went from P5 to P4. What are you looking forward to as we kick off this new era of not 5, but 4 power conferences, the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC? They all look different. What are you looking forward to the most over the course of this next year?
Missy, I think we all maybe the Big 10, although I'm not convinced Big 10 football is any better than Big 12. It was certainly last year with Michigan winning the national championship, but I think we all assume they're going to dominate college football, right? They'll get more than half of the 12 teams that are going to be in the new college football playoff. But I'm really interested in basketball. I want to see how men's and women's. I want to see how a Big 12 which has been, I think, the best conference in college basketball, men's college basketball the last few years, how they will continue to stack up and what kind of pride that they're going to take in being the national leader in that. And I even though, listen, Texas women's basketball has been fantastic the last few years, and
right.
but who's going to step up on the women's side? Is it going to be Iowa State? Is it going to be K-State? Is there a candidate among the newcomers? Colorado's coming in. We saw what they got to the Sweet 16 last year and lost to Caitlin Clark in Iowa, I believe. So who's going to step up on the women's side, and can the men maintain their sort of their national level as the leader in men's basketball? I'm really hopeful that that can continue to happen and keep basketball in the forefront of people's minds in this part of the country.
No doubt. I think you're absolutely right. And there's just a great opportunity. And I think that's one of the things that, as we just said earlier, makes college sports, college basketball so unique is that there is that opportunity. You've got a chance to kind of put your flag in the ground and say, this is where the game resides. This is where some of the best talent, best coaches, best programs can be. Blair Kerkhoff, you are a gentleman for joining me today. I so appreciate you. I know you're taking a few days off, but then it is nonstop. And if I'm not mistaken, it's training camp, college football media days, the start of the NFL season, and everything else in between. Is that not right?
That's close. And then the Royals keep playing well. We'll see out at Kauffman Stadium as well. It's a great time of year. You're right. There's a few days off in early July, but Big 12 football media days start they're January 9th and 10th, and SEC is right after that, and then Chiefs crank it up, and the Royals keep winning. So, yeah, it's a good time of year, and I had a great time today, Missy. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And all of you out there, please follow this podcast at Locked On WBB. Go over to thenexthoops.com. We've got all of your women's basketball coverage all the time. college, the Olympics are coming up. You'll want all of that info, and we've got you guys covered at The Next. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Happy 4th of July week, everybody. Stay safe, stay cool, have a wonderful holiday week, and we'll see you back here soon on Locked On Women's Basketball.